Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dairy Raid and another morning walk and talk. It's been a busy day and a half for the Badgers as the transfer portal officially opens up. We're seeing offers going out and more Badgers going into the portal, and the official unveiling of Jeff Grimes as the Badgers' new offensive coordinator. So it's a perfect time to put the feelers out there, get some questions for you guys, and do another walk and talk. So without wasting any time, let's get right into it. Okay, and the first question here, I like this one, has nothing to do with any of the two topics I just talked about, is what is the difference between an offensive coordinator and a passing game coordinator? What are their different responsibilities, how they utilize, etc.? The easiest way that you can define an offensive coordinator is the guy who's calling plays. In some systems, you'll have an offensive-minded head coach. He might be calling the plays. He'll have a separate offensive coordinator. And in situations like that, he's helping develop the offensive game plan. But for me, it's simply put, the guy who's calling plays is the offensive coordinator because he takes all the information that's gathered throughout the entire coaching staff and he puts it on the field. A passing game coordinator, this really depends on how the program is set up. And some schools or some programs will use a passing game coordinator as he is everything in the passing game up to calling plays. He is doing the breakdown, he is doing the game plan, he is installing the game plan, and then on game day he is passing off play calling responsibilities to the offensive coordinator. In certain cases, it is a lot less than that, and while he is running passing game focused, he is more big picture. And so it really depends on what your program structure is. It depends on the experience level of the play caller and the offensive or defensive mindedness of the head coach. So if we want to look at this with the Badgers, I think what we would see, I would not be surprised to get a bigger name quarterback coach to come to the Badgers, that they would slap on the passing game coordinator tag to his job description and give him those responsibilities in a way to entice a bigger name to come in to Madison. What that's going to do is allow Jeff Grimes to focus on developing the system, working between all the position coaches to get a game plan, and a passing game coordinator is going to be focused on finding the right people to implement the passing game that Coach Grimes wants in coordination with the QB coach, passing game coordinator, but then also develop a game plan. Speaking of QB coaches, the next question is, how would I consider Corey Dennis a candidate for the for the quarterback coaching job for the Badgers, given his connections to Luke Fickell, also his connections to Urban Meyer? What kind of fit would I see that? Well, to me, that depends on what Coach Grimes wants. Corey Dennis comes from the Ohio State line, so more in the lines of power spread, a little more college-based QB play. So I don't know if that would gel with Coach Grimes' offensive philosophy. It could. Certainly, Corey Dennis has experience working with mobile quarterbacks and developing him within a more up-tempo system. So those could be benefits. The only thing I would right now say against it is, now that Corey Dennis has left Ohio State, He hadn't had much success at Tulsa. Again, it's 1 year. But I think he doesn't have a ton of experience. And I think what you're going to find with the quarterback coach that is going to be brought in is they're going to look for a guy with experience. I think we saw that with Coach Grimes. Is Luke Fickell brought in a guy with 30 years of coaching experience, a guy who's adaptable. If you bring in a young guy who hasn't been around the block that much, he's going to know what he knows, and he's going to teach what he knows. He's not going to be as adaptable, and his base of knowledge is not going to be as wide as someone with a little bit more experience, which is not necessarily bad. But I think right now, Luke Fickell's looking for somebody with a little more experience. For me, that might exclude the other big candidate that Badger fans are calling for, and that's Kirk Campbell, who was the offensive coordinator at Michigan, who was just fired. He was the quarterback coach when they won the national championship with J.J. McCarthy, and again, a great young prospect. He has like 2 years of quarterback coaching experience. He just happened to have it at Michigan and at Old Dominion. But you get what I mean. But I think they're going to go older. That's my guess. All right, so let's move away from Coach Grimes a little bit and the coaching staff, and let's talk about the other hot button topic. And that is, of course, the transfer portal. And the question that I have received most about the transfer portal is a variation on which quarterback would be the right fit for the Badgers coming out of the portal season. And I've heard names. Chandler Morris has come up. Connor Wegman has come up. A lot of names. Who would I think would fit the bill? We'll start with Chandler Morris because specifically a question was asked in the Q&A about this. Chandler Morris is very talented, and his knock for me is one of the criteria that I said I was not looking for in a transfer player. Wisconsin would be his 4th program in 5 years. No, that's too much, in my opinion. I don't know why he transferred. I don't care. Hopping around like that on purpose is a big red flag for me. Just my opinion. Also, I right now am not in the mood for another 1-year rental type QB. Now, I'm saying this and you guys are yelling at your screen right now, but we've got the 2 young quarterbacks. Why bring in another one? I would agree. That's why I want someone down the middle. And where someone like Connor Wegman is a little bit better of a candidate, I don't think he's coming to Wisconsin, even though they're interested, because he's going to be, the next Kyle McCord, and he's going to get a lot of big-time offers. But what I like about him is he has 2 years of eligibility left. And to me, what it does is it gives you potentially this season, it gives him the motivation, or him or any quarterback who comes in with 2 years of eligibility left. It gives them the motivation that they have to win the job. Because if they're just coming in as a 1-year rental, I think part of the appeal is the coaching staff saying, yeah, you're going to be QB1. It's like when Tyler Van Dyke came in and everyone was talking about the quarterback competition between him and Braden Locke. There was no competition. It was waiting for Tyler Van Dyke to catch up to Braden Locke in terms of comfort within the system for him to be officially named the starter. He was starter day 1. But if you bring in a guy like this who has a couple years of eligibility left, you're going to give the younger guys a sense that he is more on common ground with them. They're on the same footing. So that is a positive thing. Also, it gives us a buffer in case the young guys don't pan out and they don't develop as quickly as we would expect or want. Not that that's necessary, but that buffer is going to be there, where you could have a couple years to grow within the system, etc. I don't think the movement and the QB room for the Badgers is over right now. I'm thinking there is going to be some post-spring movement, and whether it's one quarterback or two. So I think the guy that they're going to bring in the portal now in the winter is going into into spring ball. He's got to be a guy that they can see both in a right now and a next year type of way. All right, next up, and again, getting a lot of questions on Coach Grimes' scheme. A lot of these have come after I put out my video on breaking down his scheme. Briefly, as an introduction, first thing, thank you to everybody who's watched that video and who have subscribed based off that video. It's one of the best videos in terms of viewership I've ever had. So thank you guys for that. So the big question that I get a lot is, how would I categorize Coach Grimes' offense? Is it power spread? Is it pro spread? What is it? Well, it's a pro-style offense with college sensibilities. His running game is very pro-style. You see it on Sundays. And I think what you're going to see in the passing game, depending on who the coordinator is a simplified version of what you see on Sundays. And I think that fits the type of players we can recruit. It fits the quote-unquote identity of Wisconsin football. And I think it is saying the right buzzwords, that is going to make the sweater vests happy. Okay, but springboarding off of that, another question that I got that I really like is, in my Grimes video, I mentioned that a lot of the things that he was doing had a Shanahan-esque tinge to it. Very reminiscent of those systems. But the question is why don't we see more essentially pro-style offenses in college football? Well, the simple thing is, true pro-style offenses work a lot better with pro-style talent. Talent is the key word. And why, for the longest time, you saw the teams that stuck to the quote-unquote pro-style banner the longest were the teams that had the most pro-style talent. You would have Alabama, you would have Georgia, etc. But then what I've seen lately with the pro style is, you take someone like Jim Harbaugh, who was obviously he played in the NFL for a very long time. He took his NFL mindset to the college ranks, to Stanford. And he grew a little bit of college sensibility, simplified things a little bit, made things a little bit more dynamic, took into account that the quarterback can be a threat in not only the passing game, but the running game, and forcing the defense to play the whole field. And then he took that mentality back to the NFL. and helped spur on the growth of the mobile quarterback in the NFL. He then took what he learned the second time through the NFL, when he came into his first coaching experience, was some of the downfalls of the mobile quarterback, and brought that back to the college game. And what he did was he took pro sensibilities and he spread things out a little bit more. He found an offense that took those principles of the mobile quarterback and found ways to use it when you don't have a mobile quarterback, or you have a quarterback that you want to protect and you don't want to get beat up. And he brought that to Michigan. And now we're taking the next step. He's going back to the pro game. And I think what you're seeing right now with his Chargers offense is kind of the grand culmination of the pro and the college game fused into one that work really well with the type of quarterback he has. What does all this mean about why we don't see a true pro style offense in the NFL or in college football anymore? Well, it's simple. You're not in the NFL. You don't have pro style players. So you want to have a system that can be taught to kids who are, some of them are coming out of high school where their offenses still run 6 plays. Some of these kids are coming into college football where 95% of the passing plays went through one person. Running backs are coming from systems where they ran the wing T still. They ran the double wing still. They ran basically one running scheme. And the pro style game, when you look at the West Coast offense, for example, is very complicated. A lot of moving parts. Terminology is needlessly, ridiculously too big, too expansive. The vocabulary is too much. And what college coaches have found is you can simplify the game and then expand it and make it more complicated by the defense through formation and through tempo. And so they've taken the best of the college game and the pro game, condensed it into a simpler form, and then made it more difficult for the defenses by adding more variables. So it just comes down to, can you teach a kid or 300 pages of passing plays and 50 pages of formations? No. It's needlessly complicated, and that's why you don't see it in the college game. You see aspects of it. You see, again, the good parts, the easily taught parts, the sound logic parts of the pro game are distilled and brought to the college game. And the needlessly complicated and the stuff that strokes a lot of coaches' egos, that's left in the NFL. And why? Now, again, you've also seen in the last decade or so, a lot of that college stuff is coming to the NFL because they're realizing, one, why change what the quarterbacks already know and what made them successful? And maybe our game is a little too complicated. So, and I think the Shanahan system is, again, kind of the best and the worst of that transition. So when I say Shanahan style system, what do I mean? Well, let's go back to the beginning. And the Shanahan I'm talking about is not Kyle, it's his dad, Mike. Okay? Mike Shanahan is a disciple under the Bill Walsh coaching tree. So he is about as West Coast offense as you can get. When he was with the Broncos, however, what he did, the essential, if I could simplify what the West Coast offense is in one play, is it was an offense that utilized running backs, fullbacks, tight ends in the short to intermediate passing game as a replacement for the run game, the traditional pro style run game. So they really expanded the width and the depth of the pro passing game by implementing a lot of these shorter and intermediate routes into the passing game. What Mike Shanahan did with his offensive line coach, Alex Gibbs, who should get a lot of credit for where this offense has gone in the past 30 years, is he brought the run game back to the West Coast offense, and they did it through zone scheme, inside zone, outside zone, and taking some of those intermediate passing plays and replacing it with a run game that forced defenses to play sideline to sideline. So then off of that, you were able to build play action pass and add the more vertical aspects of the West Coast offense behind it. When he got to the Redskins, he then augmented that by the ability of a run first or running quarterback. So they expanded the pocket, a lot more play action, using that personnel to create vertical and horizontal stretches. Still using bigger personnel. He would use a lot of 12 personnel, 21 personnel. So still using the West Coast personnel, but taking it even more vertical because you use the quarterback to work sideline to sideline. As we've taken the next step in the Shanahan evolution, Kyle has really went more old school with the run game, and so he utilizes a lot of tight ends, a lot of fullbacks, and then he augments the system with, instead of having a mobile quarterback, and they do, he uses, Brock Purdy can move around a lot, so he can expand the formation. He's using Deebo Samuel and a joker type player to add more of that sideline to sideline threat. And then Sean McVay, he's all about setting up the intermediate and vertical passing game. So using the wide zone, using the outside zone to really get the defense working laterally, sideline to sideline, to then get the ball over their head with the play action game and the vertical drop back passing. And it is those elements that you can see in Coach Grimes' game. He's not a descendant of that passing tree or that offensive tree. I think where he gets it from is Dirk Cutter. And you see Dirk Cutter's pro-style offense that he ran at Boise State and at Arizona State, which he then took to the NFL. You can see the influences there, which, funny enough, I'm going to put a pin in this, but right now Dirk Cutter is the offensive coordinator again at Boise State. He's been coaching forever. I think this is just he's going home, retirement kind of job. And you look at the job he did this season with Boise State's offense, not just with Genty. Obviously, he's a great kingpin of that system. But they have, for having a running back who's at 2,500 yards, or close to it anyways, they have pretty decent balance. And keep an eye on what their scheme looks like. I wouldn't be shocked if we see some of those elements make it to the Badgers. So that's a long way around to get back to the Shanahan offense and Coach Grimes. I think he was definitely influenced because, he got the run game aspect that he's comfortable with in combination with the pro style, the West Coast offense type passing game. And I think what we see at the college level is just taking that and simplifying it a little bit. All right, so the last question we want to go through here about Coach Grimes and his offense is, I was asked, I've seen all three versions of his offense between BYU, Baylor, and Kansas. What one do I feel is maybe best? More importantly, what do I feel is better suited for the Badgers? Well, if you compare their offenses and you look at I'm looking at the run scheme right now, because until I know who the offense or the quarterback coach is, I really don't know completely what direction they're going to go in the passing game. If you look at how the run game was structured in each of those stops, I think it gives you a very good indication of where I think it's going to go, and how I'm going to give you a non-answer to that here in about 10 seconds. So if you look at BYU pretty much was a straight 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split between outside zone, inside zone, and variations of the power scheme, power, counter, etc. Very balanced, because I think they were trying to spread things out a little bit more, and they took advantage a lot of the jet sweep at BYU. If you look at Baylor was 60% outside zone. On top of the outside zone, probably another 10% of what else was there was the jet sweep and variations off the jet sweep. And then the rest was a mix between inside zone and a little bit of power. So that offense was definitely set up to attack the flanks and get the ball out in space. I think you see a lot with their offensive linemen were a lot more capable of doing that, where maybe BYU's was a little bit more downhill. So that's why you saw outside zone was maybe only a third of the scheme at that point. And then you look at Kansas, and I've been told that by Kansas fans that he basically just ran a worse version of Andy Kotelnicki's offense this season. And maybe so. Hey, when you go from a record-setting offensive coordinator, everybody is going to be compared poorly to the previous guy, right? Or to the next guy, right? If you look at his scheme this season, though, you'd see they're about 40% outside zone, and then a big mix of everything else for the remaining parts. You saw power scheme, you saw inside zone, you saw duo, you saw speed option. A big mix, and I think a lot of that had to do with the quarterback, which brings us to the finality of which one fits best. It all depends on the quarterback. Obviously, if we want to look at success rate, points, which is the most important metric of a good offense, is how many points it scores. The BYU version was clearly the best one. The reason why it was best is because he had a 3-year starter who ended up being the second pick in the NFL draft. And who cares of what he was in the NFL? Zach Wilson was a very good college quarterback. And they built a very successful system behind him, which culminated in the 11-1 season they had in 2020 and got him to be the number 2 pick in the draft. You look at Baylor and you look at Kansas, quarterback play was not on the same level. Kansas had the better running game, and that allowed them to be more balanced. Jalen Daniels was a very mobile playmaking type quarterback, so they were able to utilize him in ways that helped the offense, even if his prototypical passing game was not at the level it maybe should have been. So they used him differently there. So how is the offense going to look with the Badgers? It's all going to depend on the QB. And it's a cop-out answer, but it's true. So it's going to have to be an offense that's based around the abilities of the QB. Now, if we go into the season, let's look at the options we have. We've got three options, essentially. If we have Braden Locke as the starter, I think you're going to see a lot more reliance on the run game and on play action pass. That. If you end up with the young guys are athletic enough that the pocket can be expanded. They can use them in the QB run game a little bit more, and that will kind of balance things out, maybe look a little bit more like how Kansas looked this year. And then the wild card is, do we bring in a talented transfer? Bring in a transfer, and his ability, assuming that we have experience, an experienced quarterback who can stretch the field vertically, you'll see more of a passing game. So simple cop-out, simple non-answer is that it's all going to be dependent on the quarterback. All right, so I think we're going to call it there today. A lot of good questions from you guys. Thank you again for asking them. Also got some pretty good suggestions in the inbox I put in there as well. Suggestions for videos. And one of them was they like it when I'm collaborating and speaking with other Badger creators. And I think that's a great idea. Stay tuned. Might be some new stuff coming along with that. Otherwise, the off season is just beginning. As the coaching staff gets nailed down, it's going to give us more to talk about as the transfers in and out kind of solidify themselves, and we see where the roster is going to be this coming season. We will nail down more stuff to talk about. But until then, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.